When astronomers investigate the potential for life in a new star and planet system, they will often talk about a zone called the Goldilocks Zone. So this is a zone a certain distance from the star at the center of the system, which has just the right conditions and pressures and temperature to potentially support liquid water, which has been determined to be a very important part of why we have life on Earth, and therefore would suggest that planets in this Goldilocks zone are more likely to potentially have life. The Goldilocks zone concept also applies to the notion of confidence in a professional career. And this is the topic of today's Hacking Academia video. Confidence is a really important concept both personally and professionally. In your professional career, your degree of confidence in your own abilities will affect just about everything that you do. So it's a really important concept to think about and to be aware of in terms of your own confidence levels. In particular, confidence will affect professional activities like applying for jobs, applying or negotiating a raise or a promotion, and putting yourself in contention for prizes or awards. Confidence is front and center, one of the key considerations that affects those activities in particular. Confidence is also specific to the context in which you find yourself. So I play a little bit of tennis and I do a little bit of running, for example. I might be confident that if I turned up to a casual recreational league or running event, I would be able to put in a reasonable show. If I was dropped into the Olympic finals of the 10,000 meters, I would be very not confident in my abilities to finish the race in any sort of respectable manner in that context. So context is really important to confidence. Confidence does not exist in a vacuum. It needs to be appropriate or matched to the context of the situation in which you are applying it. I find that simplifying the concept of confidence into 3 different confidence zones can be particularly helpful, and that's one of the things I'm going to go through in this video. It's 3 confidence zones, with one of those zones further being split in 2. The first confidence zone is the underconfident zone. And this is probably the one I encounter the most in my professional career in terms of especially mentoring and supervising activities. And this is a situation where you do not have enough faith or confidence in your level of abilities or experience for the context at hand. Now, you may have very good reasons or past history why you are unconfident, but nevertheless, this lack of confidence in a lot of cases is preventing good things from happening. For example, going for a job or a promotion or for a prize nomination. The second confidence zone is the so-called Goldilocks zone. So this is where your confidence levels are about right and about appropriate to the context in which you find yourself. Now, the implication of Goldilocks is perhaps that you should always be in this zone, and that is not what I advocate. But in my experience, most people don't spend enough time in the Goldilocks zone. So instead, one of 2 things typically occurs. Either they're stuck in the extreme, either the extreme unconfidence or extreme overconfidence zone permanently, or they oscillate wildly between those 2 extremes, but don't spend, in my opinion, enough time in that middle sweet spot Goldilocks confidence zone. The third confidence zone, and this is the one that I would split into 2, is the overconfidence zone. So this is where your belief in your own abilities and capability of doing something are perhaps a little bit in excess of reality. And I would split this category into 2 different subcategories. So the first is sort of being moderately overconfident. A typical situation where this occurs is if someone's been on a particularly hot streak, they've had a bunch of successes in a row, it feels like they're invincible. It is very natural for someone to become a little bit overconfident in that situation. Now, I don't think that's particularly damaging. And then there is the ridiculously overconfident syndrome, or what some people call Dunning-Kruger effect, where someone is completely oblivious that their level of confidence in their own capabilities is totally out of touch with reality. And a lot of damage can be done, a lot of hurt to your own ego can be done if you find yourself in that situation unknowingly. And this is definitely one of the more problematic levels of confidence. So I mentioned before that I encounter probably more people in the unconfident or not sufficiently confident given their capabilities and talent zone. This is really important in professional careers because it will hinder their willingness to go out on a limb and apply for a new job or a promotion or put themselves up for a prize or even promote the achievements that they've been able to pull off. And so a lot of the work that mentors and coaches and supervisors should do in these situations is gradually and gently building up these individuals' confidence levels to be appropriate to their actual capability set. I mentioned already that I think people should probably on average spend a little bit more time in the so-called Goldilocks confidence zone. But it does also not imply that you should never be in the overconfident zone. So you will need to be slightly irrationally overconfident in your own abilities to go on occasion for some of those really risky objectives. So maybe it's a grant or a fellowship with an extremely low acceptance rate or a very prestigious prize, and trusted advisors and mentors have told you based on experience that you actually legitimately have a small but non-zero shot. And in those situations, a little bit of targeted overconfidence can be quite helpful because if you approach it from a purely rational perspective, you may not end up applying or may not apply with enough gusto. So overconfidence can be a good thing sparingly. You don't want to be overconfident all of the time though, because that's going to have a lot of negative repercussions. When you are a little bit overconfident, not to excess, but a little bit overconfident, you may get some feedback in your applications or your promotion applications or prize that you're fantastic, you're great, but you're perhaps maybe a little bit overconfident. Now that can seem like a personal attack, but another way of interpreting that is you've probably set the dial about right, because when you submit one of these applications, you don't want to die wondering, so to speak. You don't want the people reading it to not have a very clear idea of what you're claiming your achievements or your value or worth for the thing you're applying for is. And so if you are a little bit on the side of being slightly overconfident, most people and most groups will understand that. Obviously, if you're super, super arrogant and full of yourself, that's not going to go down well. But a little bit of slight overconfidence is often not that misplaced. Confidence levels, and particularly assessing and understanding your own confidence levels, is one of those things where you really need to rely on other individuals around you. So these could be trusted colleagues, mentors, or advisors, especially ones who understand the field that you work in, because they will provide you some very valuable external perspective on whether perhaps you are underselling yourself and should really put yourself up for some of these prizes, for example, or whether perhaps you're pushing a little bit hard and should dial it back a bit. This is one of those activities that educated, bright people are particularly bad at self-assessing, and so you should really regularly rely on and check in with others around you as to whether they think you're at about the right level of confidence. It's not something you can do entirely yourself. One of the positive upsides, of course, of checking in with others about your confidence levels is that often those around you will genuinely tell you that you're probably not, you're probably selling yourself short, and that you actually do have a valid shot or valid right to go for a certain activity or prize or promotion, and they'll support you to do so. So often that feedback is going to be relatively positive anyway. You can, of course, take self-analysis and psychoanalysis a little bit too far in your professional career, but confidence, I think, is one of those things where most people don't deliberately think about and analyze their own levels of confidence enough and regularly. And so I think it's worthwhile to occasionally check in about your level of confidence, whether it's appropriate or perhaps misplaced to the context, to check in specifically with others around you, what they think and their perspectives, because you won't be able to analyze yourself entirely by yourself. And then hopefully the result of that is you're more often in a situation where your confidence levels are appropriate to the thing that you're doing, which can have on-flow effects of maximizing your chances of success, maximizing or minimizing the chance that you'll go in under false pretenses, doing something or attempting something that's completely inappropriate, and hopefully help the overall trajectory of your career.